Some say Elon Musk is unstoppable in his race to crack AI at scale. We're going to dive into Elon's advantage. We're also going to hear from Google's DeepMind CEO and ask the question, is compute going to continue to scale?
If we had World War II levels of motivation, if we had Manhattan level project level intensity around doing a specific thing, how fast could we do it? Which is like an Elon, like if Elon was running the government, how fast could it happen? Versus,
it was for a brief period.
So maybe then we should put it like, if Elon ran the government like he ran SpaceX, as opposed to the question of like, okay, what is actually practically likely to happen given that we are not treating it with World War II level intensity?
So if you look at XAI, which Elon is involved in, obviously, what are they actually focused on right now? Right? They're focused on the chips, right? Because they understand like the key bottleneck is the chips, not the solar power, right? Because even if Trump puts in a 200% tariff on Chinese solar and we're not able to bypass it via like Vietnam or something, it's still a bargain. It doesn't matter. Like if you need solar to run your data center, it doesn't hurt in terms of the overall cost picture. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is having the chips at like competitive capabilities per chip and enough of them, installed in your PCBs, in your data centers, hooked up to your liquid cooling, ready to go. And that's actually something that Elon and his companies are great at. It's like figuring out this mass production, semi-automated mass production. They've got this facility in Texas, which is making the Starlink receivers completely automated. But like, at what point does we don't have a solar panel factory become on the critical path? I very much doubt it's ever going to be on the critical path. If you're like XAI right now trying to build Colossus One data center in downtown Memphis, right? You want to get it done super fast. So you're like, well, what are all the different things we need? What are the factors of production to build this? We need a building. Well, we don't have time to build a building. We'll buy a building. Okay, and we'll adapt it. We need power. We need thermal cooling. That stuff you can deliver on a truck. So that's what they did. Right. Need access to gas. They had access to gas there. They could tap into a local gas line. And actually, if you can tap into a gas line, generally speaking, you can get enough power. Like the energy transmission capacity of like your regular gas delivery pipelines is way, way higher than electricity overhead lines, and it's easy to upgrade or whatever. And so if you're in this situation right now, you say, well, are we constrained by our ability to go and rent gas turbines? And no, they're not, because there was enough available once, maybe twice, right? But at a certain point, you realize, well, as you grow, you start to touch all these additional constraints. And some of those constraints include gas availability. So there's a lot of chat about doing this in Pennsylvania, for example, where there's quite a lot of stranded gas in parts of Texas. But at the same time, the United States is gearing up in its ability to export natural gas overseas. So the price will not be infinitely low forever. You start to run into constraints around turbine manufacturing rate, around transformer production rate, around grid capacity, and also kind of running into problems where the AIs and the humans who depend on like kind of legacy electricity production and delivery utilities kind of competing with each other. So if you kind of look far enough in the future, you say, well, you can just turn up the dial arbitrarily high. Like you can say, well, we're going to put in a gigawatt a year. Well, we can meet that constraint with gas turbines, right? We're not going to run out of natural gas at 1 gigawatt per year indefinitely. Okay, what if we're doing 5 gigawatts per year? What if we're doing 50 gigawatts per year? What if we're doing 100 gigawatts per year? Like, you can just break the situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But not to reach prematurely for analogies, but like Henry Kaiser set up the shipyard in Richmond, just down the road here, in San Francisco, over near Berkeley, and initially making ships for the British, and then by the end of the war, 4 separate shipyards operating in parallel, to the point where like he was bottlenecked on his supply of steel, because steel was rare enough in the war, because everyone was using it for different things, that Kaiser Industries went off and built not only a steel mill, but also a steel mine, right? They went and started digging rocks out of the ground to turn into ships.
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of situation you have here, where these massive industrial verticals, and here I'm quite bullish on XAI in particular, because the Elon cinematic universe has just done so much industrial stuff compared to, the Googles or Metas of this world, can kind of reach all the way through down into primary material supply if they need to.
This clip suggests that XAI and Elon's companies are uniquely positioned to handle massive industrial challenges, which scaling data centers is. Is this Elon's key advantage and XAI's key advantage, or do you think there are other companies and hyperscalers or competitors which have another more important advantage?
Well, if the scaling limitation on AI does in fact end up being energy, which is, one of the big trends, that this is the conversation that is going on both in Washington, and in Silicon Valley, that a lot of people expect that will be the case, that we're going to continue to build bigger and bigger data centers, that those investments are going to prove themselves justifiable and worthwhile, that there's going to be return on that investment that repays the amount of capex that we're putting into the ground. And so, I mean, you do have to grant a couple of givens and say that, yeah, I think that's going to be true. And then if that's going to be true, then and the way that we continue building more powerful AI is we build bigger and bigger data centers, then I do think that Elon is uniquely positioned in the United States, which is the global leader in frontier AI research still. It does paint a pretty scary picture, honestly, of what the race between the United States and China could look like. That even if Elon, through Herculean effort, is able to build massive scale things that are even beyond what Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta are able to put into the ground. Just at this, I think Meta has the resources to do it, but they don't necessarily have the ability to move at the speed that either China or XAI is able to move at. And I think that really kind of speaks for itself based on the current lay of the land, that Chinese open source is really ahead of Meta open source already. And then XAI is also ahead of Llama. So all of those things really do paint this picture where Elon in specific, through, his work with XAI, also owning X, and his experience not only with those things, but running SpaceX and Tesla, allows him to have this toolkit, just as, he was mentioning, where he can eliminate more bottlenecks and eliminate them faster than anyone else in the United States. And I think it's, just incredible at this point in time in human history that we get to witness this clash of titans on the scale of giant nations in technology in a way that obviously has massive geopolitical ramifications. It's kind of its own version of an arms race or a Cold War. We're getting to see what is the decentralized method of the market that we have here in the United States, which is, China also has its market and its way of doing things. But how does the state-sponsored capitalist model that China uses compete against the American, I hesitate to call it capitalist because it is definitely not really free market capitalism, but the almost crony capitalist overall system that does have a pretty highly competitive and robust free market, specifically around tech. How is that able to stack up against this giant behemoth that is China and the Chinese economy, when the CCP specifically has decided that winning the AI arms race is of utmost strategic national importance? The stakes could not be higher, and the drama could not be any more stark. And we're definitely, as Elon would say, living in the most interesting of times. I can't imagine something that would feel more existential than this feels right now.
You mentioned speed, and we're talking about speed of iteration, speed of solving complex issues and challenges, speed of execution. The next clip is from Dylan Patel, CEO of Semi-Analysis, who is one of the most respected AI commentators in the space.
Because they get bonuses based on how fast they build it, right? It's like there is crazy stuff going on to alleviate bottlenecks, but it's like there's bottlenecks everywhere. And it really just takes a really, really hyper competent organization tackling each of these things and creatively thinking about each of these things. Because if you do it the layman old way, you're gonna lose, and you're gonna be too slow, right? Which is why OpenAI and Microsoft, partially, Microsoft is not building Stargate for OpenAI, right? It's because it would have just been too slow, and they're doing it the layman old way. You have to go crazy. That's why Microsoft rents from CoreWeave a ton, right? Because, oh, wait, we need someone who can do things faster than us. And, oh, look, CoreWeave's doing it faster. And now, OpenAI is going to Oracle and CoreWeave and others, right? Nscale in Finland and all these other companies all around the world, the Middle East, right? G42, anywhere and everywhere they can get compute, because you put your eggs in many baskets, and whoever executes the best will win. And this infrastructure is very, very hard. Software is fast turnaround times. It's still hard. Software is not easy, but it's the cycle time is very fast for try something, fail, right? Try something else. It is not for infra, right? What has XAI actually done to deserve their prior funding rounds? They haven't released a leading edge model, right? And yet their valuation's higher than Anthropic today, right? At least, Anthropic's raising, but whatever, right? Like it's Elon A, and B, they've tackled a problem creatively and done it way faster than anyone else, which is building Colossus, right?
Elon is well known for often finding the maximum point of leverage. What is the most important part of the bottleneck to solve? What is the most important issue to resolve and figure out to then release everything else? How important is scaling the AI clusters and solving that at large scale to then make yourself the most important AI company in the world? And if that's not the maximum point of leverage, what is?
Well, it's definitely an extreme point of leverage. It's hard to say if it is the maximum point of leverage. There's really 4 things that go into AI. There's the compute that you have to throw at the problem. There's the data that you have to throw at the problem. Then there's also energy. And finally, the specific algorithms that you're using. And XAI so far is not known for doing anything too creative or out of the box on the algorithms. And part of that is because when you have these huge clusters that they do have, it costs a lot to run those. And so you don't really want to do anything too novel and too crazy in the architecture of your algorithms on these massive training runs. But, one of the things that if you have the energy and you have the largest compute cluster, then you can do more with the same data and you can do more with the same algorithms. And so even if other people outcompete them on algorithms, that's something that eventually they can reverse engineer back into, innovate around. They do have unique access to data and a unique scale that allows them to train, as I think we've mentioned before, on a significantly higher portion of audio and video data, or do synthetic data generation that really helps to curate the models. And so you really can't lose by building these mega clusters at this point in time, as long as you can pay yourself back over the long run. And Elon's ability to back into profitable business models in these incredible world-changing businesses is also unparalleled. That's, I think, another one of the reasons why it's not just that the investors that are continuing to pour money into XAI with Elon believe in his ability to accomplish some technical feat that other people can't accomplish. They also believe in his ability to then create the financial returns that will make their investment worth their money. I mean, you do almost kind of have to put it all together. It's that combination of compute and funding. He just has a longer runway than everybody else because of his proven track record of being able to tackle these bottlenecks at a scale and a speed that no one else can.
Yeah, I think that long runway argument is an interesting one as well. It does seem like there is a very long runway ahead of us in the world of compute and where that's scaling. And to talk about that, next up, we have the DeepMind CEO, who I think is also someone Hans would quite like to see as the CEO of Google, but we'll let him take it away.
How crucial is the scaling of compute to building AGI? This is a question that's an engineering question. It's almost a geopolitical question. Because it also integrated into the supply chains and energy, a thing that you care a lot about, which is potentially fusion. So innovating on the side of energy also. Do you think we're going to keep scaling compute?
I think so, for several reasons. I think compute, there's the amount of compute you have for training. Often it needs to be co-located. So actually even bandwidth constraints between data centers can affect that. So there's additional constraints even there. And that's important for training, obviously, the largest models you can. But there's also, because now AI systems are in products and being used by billions of people around the world, you need a ton of inference compute now. And then on top of that, there's the thinking systems, the new paradigm of the last year that where they get smarter the longer amount of inference time you give them at test time. So all of those things need a lot of compute. And I don't really see that slowing down. And as AI systems become better, they'll become more useful and there'll be more demand for them. So both from the training side actually is only just one part of that. It may even become the smaller part of what's needed in the overall compute that's required.
Yeah, that's one sort of almost meme kind of thing, which is like the success and the incredible aspects of VO3. There's people kind of make fun of, like, the more successful it becomes, the servers are sweating.
Yes, exactly. The inference. Yeah, exactly. We did a little video of the servers frying eggs and things, and that's right. And we're going to have to figure out how to do that. There's a lot of interesting hardware innovations that we do. As you know, we have our own TPU line, and we're looking at like inference-only things, inference-only chips, and how we can make those more efficient. We're also very interested in building AI systems, and we have done the help with energy usage. So help data center energy, like for the cooling systems, be efficient, grid optimization, and then eventually things like helping with plasma containment fusion reactors. We've done lots of work on that with Commonwealth Fusion, and also one could imagine reactor design, and then material design. I think is one of the most exciting. New types of solar material, solar panel material, room temperature superconductors has always been on my list of dream breakthroughs, and optimal batteries. And I think a solution to any, one of those things would be absolutely revolutionary for, climate and energy usage. And we're probably close, and again, in the next 5 years to having AI systems that can materially help with those problems.
If you were to bet, sorry for the ridiculous question, but what is the main source of energy in like 20, 30, 40 years? Do you think it's going to be nuclear fusion?
I think fusion and solar are the two that I would bet on. Solar, I mean, it's the fusion reactor in the sky, of course. And I think really the problem there is batteries and transmission. So, as well as more efficient solar material, perhaps eventually, in space, these kind of Dyson sphere type ideas. And fusion, I think, is definitely doable, seems, if we have the right design of reactor and we can control the plasma and fast enough and so on. And I think both of those things will actually get solved. So we'll probably have at least, those are probably the two primary sources of renewable, clean, almost free, or perhaps free energy.
What a time to be alive.
Indeed, what a time to be alive. Google DeepMind CEO predicts compute will continue to scale. Hans, what do you make of his predictions?
I love Demis Hassabis. He's really one of the key people who has driven this entire AI revolution that has happened over the past several years. His importance in this whole story is right up there with Jensen, with Ilya Sutskever and some of the people that started OpenAI. Ilya, worked at Google DeepMind. That was Elon was able to pull him away from Demis Hassabis, and that may have been even before Google picked up DeepMind. I'm not sure. Anyways, he's been a central figure in this. He started the DeepMind group, which was able to crack first AlphaGo, and then has gone on to basically master the vast majority of video games better than the best humans across a whole wide range of different types. And he has been leading this AI effort inside of Google that has seemed like it was dormant for a while because it was kind of insulated from the public, and the pressure that Sam Altman, who also shouldn't be counted out in this race, but honestly, in the United States, the two major forces that I think are going to be the most major contenders, like position 1 and 2, are definitely going to be Google, DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, because they have, when we talk about the things that are needed, the data, the compute, the energy, and the algorithms, Google is in a better position relative to OpenAI in every single one of those categories. They invented the transformer architecture that then OpenAI was built on top of later, or that OpenAI built GPT 3.5, well, 1, 2, 3, 3.5, ChatGPT on top of. Anyways, his whole motivation in doing all this is actually very, very well aligned with Elon's you can hear him talking about all the scientific discoveries that personally is motivated to try and solve using this technology. And that is his core motivation, is he wants to create tools that allow humans to solve our hardest challenges and create a bright and exciting and abundant future. And so I think he is distinct from the Larry Page ethos within inside of Google that has Elon concerned. And I'm almost more worried today about Sam Altman being the dark figure behind the development of AI that Elon worried about, and that maybe Google is actually, the lesser of the two evils as far as his competitors in that space. But all that to say, his analysis really is spot on. And the reason that he sounds very much like Elon is because these are really the first principles of not only the way that AI is currently being developed, and the first principles of then the implications that has for energy. And it's just much easier to convert sunlight, all of the fossil fuels that exist in the world are just very, very long and slow and inefficient processes by which we turned sunlight originally into something that captured energy, into something that then we extracted energy from, and being able to go direct through either fusion or through solar power is incredibly important. The comment that he also made about batteries and transmission being kind of the bottleneck for just doing PV solar here on Earth is true, but that's, one of the technologies that is on an extremely steep cost curve decline. And we are, as a species, figuring out how to make more and better batteries faster, cheaper at a accelerating rate. And so I think, it's guaranteed that that's going to be, it's already a large portion of the overall energy that's being added primarily in China, but, it's still a significant part of new energy production being added here in the United States. But that's only going to continue to become more and more the case over time because the costs are declining faster on solar and batteries compared to any of our other alternatives. And, we're going to use a lot more natural gas here in the near future, kind of going back to the first clip that we were talking on, because it's available, it's fast. It is relatively cost competitive right now with what we're doing for solar, and it doesn't have some of the challenges that solar has as far as the need to store the energy because you have a consistent base load. And so specifically for an AI data center, when you use basically the same amount of power all day, every day, something like natural gas works really well for that. For the overall grid, you always have a challenge of sometimes you need a lot of energy and other times you don't need very much energy. And so matching your energy production to this changing demand picture over the course of the day is a dynamic that means that we need batteries to solve that problem, regardless of how we make the energy, essentially, because that time arbitrage is something that, as long as the batteries are cheap enough, it will make tons of sense to have those batteries. And so then if you have the batteries, the challenges with the fact that, the sun is only shining in the middle of the day and only in these parts, and then what happens if you have clouds, like a lot of those challenges get solved at the same time and in the same way that you solve the challenges of, hey, we've got the ability to make this much power throughout the day, and most of the time we are only using this much. And so, we're not using our ability to create power to its 100% capacity because it's just not needed. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying that, Demis is very, very tuned in to how all of these different complicated things work and fit together. And he's an incredible person to listen to if you want to understand how things are evolving. And, the last thing I'll add to that is he was also, a key driving force behind the AlphaFold project that Google released here recently, where they were able to figure out the protein structures of basically like all the proteins and just open source that to the world. Like, this is an incredible gift to humanity and to science. And it is the type of ethos that Demis operates Google DeepMind with. We've only just begun, it's already started to have tremendous positive impacts in healthcare and in science, and we've only just begun to see what those are going to be long term. So there's a lot of really exciting things that they're doing on the back of that will have huge impacts on the world. And that's before we even get to the things that Demis talked about. And he has a pretty good track record on his timelines of saying, if he thinks that within 5 years they have the ability to make meaningful advances in material science to help with both solar cells and just lots of other technologies, that's probably something you might not be able to take it to the bank, but it's probably a high probability of being true. It's just one more thing that's like, okay, all of the things that we think are these insurmountable problems, a lot of them are just physics or biology or chemistry, and our tools for solving physics, biology, and chemistry challenges are rapidly expanding. And so our conceptions about the bottlenecks of the future are very, very detached from reality.
If we tie three of those clips together, or the three clips together, in the first clip, it was Elon's got an advantage. He's had experience building mass industrial projects. The second clip was it's all about speed of iteration and execution. And that's in relation to building large compute clusters. The third clip then confirmed what you're going to want to do in the future is build as much compute as possible to solve these problems. So when we look 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, when will energy be one of those large bottlenecks? And I think that's really important. I mean, if you're an NVIDIA shareholder, That's really important, because at what point does that limit how many chips you might want to build? At what point does it limit the problems you can solve, the AI models you can build, the amount of capacity you have for inference for people to use your AI models, etc.? So when does energy play a role in that discussion?
So the way that Elon thinks about this is that energy will be a major bottleneck right after the bottleneck of transformers. And so far, we haven't seen a huge bottleneck pop up in these energy transformers yet. And a lot of people are really speculating that we're looking at the late 2020s, so maybe 2027, 2028, 2029, somewhere in there, we basically exhaust our ability here in the United States, at least, to continue to build at the scale that we're trying to build and use primarily natural gas as the energy source. So assuming that at that point we have also solved the transformer bottleneck, I think that's roughly the time when we start looking at running into needing to do other things, which, solar is definitely at that point. Once you've brought on as much natural gas as you can, unless there are some sort of magic things that happen with the supply chain and red tape around building, these big natural gas turbines that it takes to turn natural gas into electric power are big, heavy, complicated machines. We don't currently have the ability to manufacture them at a high rate. They're already sold out. We're going to exhaust, the number of them that we can make for the next few years pretty rapidly. So it would take either a major breakthrough there where we can do some, either bring on more factories or build a different type rapidly or something in order for it not to flip over into, okay, let's just add as much solar. But that's the thing, that solar is continuing to get cheaper. I think there are going to be people that are looking at how do we make solar at cost that is competitive with China, especially if it's competitive with China and whatever tariff Trump puts on solar from China, to where we can start rapidly expanding our deployment of solar here in the United States. And then the thing that you really have to look at in that situation is, where are the regulatory environments that allow for, massive installations of this power? It's all coming very rapidly. And we're only talking about 3 to 5 years from now is kind of the time horizon where this stuff starts to be, a huge bottleneck and a deciding moment in this arms race between us and China.